Yeah, we're all right. He's here. We're gonna get started. Let me turn the lights down.
Yes, I do. Nice.
And
If you come over here, why don't you move over here?
Yeah,
You're not gonna see.
no, okay.
that one can't, this one you go.
It's okay.
Okay, that's as dark as it can get. Okay, so I think everyone in the room knows me. Those on Zoom, I'm Michael Cantwell, president of the Democratic Club of Delray Beach. And we're really excited to have Debbie Mucarsel-Powell come and speak to us tonight. But before we begin, we have one piece of club housekeeping, and that is elections for the officers of the club will be held at the next meeting in March, or the next at the March meeting. And I'm appointing, bylaws have empower me to appoint a nominating committee to select candidates for each of the offices. And I don't think, well, Dave is on. I'm appointing Bob Averak, Mary Fader, Dave Kulik, Charlene, and Janet Swybeck, and they will come up with a candidate for each position. They'll announce it at the January meeting. At that meeting, anyone that wants to also be considered, there's nominations from the floor. So, and then at the March
Audio, that was what we didn't do.
So, is there a question?
Mike, just to let you know, I am here.
Okay. Oh yeah. Look at that. Okay. And Bob, since you're here, he's going to chair the nominating committee. Bob's our parliamentarian. So, by way of introduction, Debbie was the first Ecuadorian American elected to Congress in 2018, and we'd like to see her be the first one elected to the Senate to displace Rick Scott, one of the most like members of that chamber.
Yeah, mute.
Mitch McConnell. In a recent poll, Debbie has a 47 to.
Michael, I just muted everybody, which included you. Unmute yourself, please.
Oh, he did it.
I did it. There was too much noise coming from other people.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So in that poll, they told people about each candidate, you know, a little bit about the two candidates, and among NPAs, when before they were told about each candidate, Rick Scott had a 7-point lead. After they were told about each candidate, Congresswoman Mucarsel-Powell had a 16-point lead. So she's not as well known as Rick Scott. And to know Rick is to revile him. To know Debbie, I think my impression is to love her. So well, that's what we need to do, because Scott, as unlikable as he is, he's white, he's male, and he's rich. And that's how you win elections, statewide elections in Florida. He's if he weren't a white male and rich, he probably wouldn't be able to run for office, because he would have been in jail for running a company that was fined $1.7 billion for bilking Medicare. Yeah. Scott, as probably everyone knows, was forced to resign. and got a golden parachute, and that helped him buy 2 governor's elections and 1 Senate election. So sending and packing is critical to holding the Senate. Now that Manchin has stepped down or chosen not to run, we're going to be getting some money in Florida for the first time. The money that would have gone to West Virginia to hold that seat is going to come to Florida to flip Scott's seat. So I think our goal is, I mean, one of the problems we've had is having contentious primaries and not getting behind somebody early on. So I'm delighted that we have the opportunity to hear from Congresswoman Mucarsel-Powell, and I'll turn the floor over to her now. Dave, if you can make, there we go. Okay.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Michael, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you to the Delray Beach Democrats who are hosting me tonight. I was looking forward to being with you tonight, and I see some really great background holiday decorations from some of you. So happy holidays to everyone. I'm already getting in the holiday mood. My name is Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. I'm a former Congresswoman. I'm a mother of 3. I'm a proud Ecuadorian American immigrant, and I'm running to defeat Rick Scott in 2024. And look, it wasn't too long ago that this community here in South Florida needed change. It was in 2018 that people came together, people like you, that helped knock on doors, that believed that I was going to work for the people that were going to send me to Congress, that elected me to become the first South American immigrant to ever be elected. And so many people thought that someone like myself, and still believe that someone like myself that came here at the age of 14, my mother brought my sisters and I from Ecuador looking for opportunities, that started working at a minimum wage job at a donut shop, would never be able to graduate from a really great college, get a master's degree, work at FIU as an associate dean at the medical school, and then eventually be elected to serve in the United States Congress. But I always knew that with hard work, if you believe enough, that anything is possible here in the United States. And it's that feeling that I've been getting here in the state of Florida, the feeling for change, the feeling that democracy is at stake, that we need someone that's going to work for every Floridian in the state, rising up the voices of those that have lost their voice, that I know I'm going to be able to defeat Rick Scott in 2024. And the contrast could not be any more clear between Rick Scott, who is a fraud, and Floridians know it, and someone who has worked my entire life just to give back to our community to better the life of the people that I've been working for here in South Florida. Look, while Rick Scott was writing a plan to sunset Medicare, Social Security, repeal the Affordable Care Act, and raise taxes on Florida families, I was in Congress writing the plan to expand Medicare coverage. And gun violence is a very personal issue for me. I lost my father to gun violence when I was 24 years old. And while I was working for the past 2 years here with Gabby Giffords, traveling around the state, building an education program to prevent more gun violence, Rick Scott voted against the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that would bring significant funding for school safety, for mental health programs, and to reduce the community violence that we're experiencing every single day, especially in communities of color here in our state. And as a mom of 2 daughters, I chaired the Women's Hispanic Caucus in Congress. Let me tell you, I am a proud Latina for choice, and I will not allow politicians like Rick Scott to be making the decisions for my daughters, to take away the rights, those same rights that I've been able to have coming to this incredible country. And I know that we can beat this man. I've felt it from the very beginning. He's never run in a presidential election. He's never won by more than a percentage point. He was only able to beat Senator Bill Nelson by putting in $64 million of his own money and only won by 10,000 votes. He's never run against the millions of women that are going to come out to protect their rights when we have that abortion ballot initiative in November 2024. And he's never had to confront a woman like myself, a Latina, that knows exactly how to communicate with my community down in South Florida and with Floridians all over the state. So I feel a lot of hope. I know that we have some of the largest snakes here, the country knows, in the Everglades, and one of them got out and went to Washington, D.C. It's time to get him back to the Everglades and back home and send someone that's going to represent you, that's going to protect Medicare and Social Security, that's going to protect our environment, protect our children from gun violence, and make sure that we give those opportunities that my mother brought me here for that are disappearing for so many people. So I'm just glad to be with you tonight. I want to have a conversation. I don't want to take the whole time just talking at you, but it's so important for you to get to know me, for me to earn your trust, to earn your vote, because together, this is going to require every single one of us working closely together to be able to beat Rick Scott. And I know we can. So thank you, Michael. Would love to answer any questions if anybody has questions for me.
Questions? Questions on Zoom? I can't, I,
Hello?
Hi, I have a question. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, I'm trying to look
Okay.
for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that you can, if you can't see me, that's quite all right. I'm in the car, actually.
Oh.
So I'm not driving. It's okay. My husband's driving. But Debbie, I am on the board for the Boca del Rey Club. I just left that group there and am heading home, but I did want to thank you for speaking with us. Tell me, what is your strategy for reaching those Latinos in Miami? That is a concern of mine, and I don't think anybody is better equipped to do it than you. However, what is that strategy to get, I don't know if it's just the NPAs, or is there a way to swing that Miami area back to being at least a little bit more either moderate or Democrat?
Yeah, and the Miami-Dade County, as you know, is 70% Hispanic, and it's 20%. The Miami-Dade County area represents almost 20% of the entire electorate for the entire state. So we can't win statewide without winning Miami-Dade, and also by a significant margin. One of the things that I've done, and one of the things that we saw in the polling, is I've been very present talking to my community down here in Miami-Dade and to the Hispanic community for years now. I've never left. I've always been here. When I was in Congress, I was very present, but then I was not reelected in 2020, although I still overperformed the top of the ticket. I've been very present in Spanish media, in Spanish radio, in Spanish TV, and working with communities to prevent gun violence. So I've earned a lot of their trust. And when you poll that group, when they put Rick Scott and me head to head in Hispanics here in Miami-Dade, I win them over by double digits. I think it's 14 points. And that's one of the reasons why we know that we can win this race, that we can beat Rick Scott. And I've been continuing to do that. It's very important to be in front of the Latino community. Latinos are very diverse. People thinking that they're all becoming right-wing, that's not true. Latino Democrats, Latino are still voting for Democrats by 2-to-1 margins. We've been looking at the numbers. In the rest of the country, it's a little higher. It's like 3-to-1, but here it's 2-to-1. And so our community is very diverse. I just had a cafecito, a coffee meeting on Tuesday, and we had a huge number of Cuban Democrats that came out that are really excited about the race, that they're going to help me promote my name and everything that I'm doing. And this was not the first one. I did another one like a couple of months ago, and there were a lot of people, with some Republicans, that attended as well. By the way, the non-Cuban Hispanics that live here in Miami-Dade and also in Orlando, they tend to vote for Democrats very easily. They identify with the values. And my story is their story, the story of an immigrant that came here at 14, that started working to help ends meet, to help my mom. They really connect to that, because at the end of the day, immigrants that are coming to the United States, and a lot of them coming legally, are here to work, and they're rejecting this notion that they're being vilified, that they're being criminalized. They just want to work. They want those opportunities for themselves, for their children, for their families. So they connect to my story very well. And I'm going to continue to do that. But it's talking to them early. And I've already started doing that even before I filed for Senate, and just continuing on and making investments, right? I mean, we're going to have to make investments in my campaign on all Spanish media, particularly in Miami-Dade.
Thank you so much. I needed to hear that and get a little bit more inspiration that I've been having. Thank you.
Debbie, I think that one of the one of the things that hurt Biden the most and is hurting Democrats in that community are the charges of socialism. And of course, it's a ridiculous claim. It's Republicans cried socialists when unemployment insurance was introduced. Ronald Reagan infamously did a commercial for the AMA when Medicare was being introduced, saying that if Medicare passes, when we're old, we're all going to sit on our front porches and talk about what America was like when it was free. And of course, nobody except Rick Scott and some other Republicans would have any interest in giving up their Medicare. Is there, I mean, how would you message that? I mean, I wrote an article, your mama was a socialist, Marco, because Rubio's mother was on Social Security. And you know, either socialism is Social Security, like democratic socialism, or it's state control of the means of production, which it's obviously not.
So I will let me give you a little background on this. And I was having a conversation recently with some women in New York, and there is absolutely this fear and trauma from a lot of Latin Americans, Cubans, Central Americans that come here because they have fled very radicalized left-wing socialist dictatorships. They get into government through the democratic process, then they take over. It's exactly what actually Republicans here in this country want to do. They get elected democratically, and then they start destroying all the institutions that protect democracy, and they take over. They become dictators, and they start taking away rights. They destroy the social, economic, and political institutions of their countries. So when you hear left wing, you immediately, as Latin Americans, you feel that trauma. So what they've done very well is connect the Democratic Party left wing to these left-wing socialist dictatorships, which really have been just terrible for the people of Latin America. So one of the things that I'm going to start with, and people, when they hear my story, I also served under the administration to be the special advisor for the Summit of the Americas. And I stood very strong and very firmly against inviting Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, because they are violating and continue to violate human rights. And you need to be in front of those issues, especially here for Latinos here in Miami-Dade County. And they know that I'm with the Venezuelans fighting for freedom. They know that I'm with Cubans fighting for freedom. And the Ortega regime in Nicaragua is a horrible regime that has, all of them have really imprisoned any sort of opposition, journalists, media. In Cuba, they're still holding over 600 prisoners just for marching, asking for democracy and freedom and liberty. And so you need to be able to talk about those issues. And no one better than myself, as a Latin American that has seen what these social dictatorships have done, will be able to stand firmly against that and also represent Latinos in Washington, D.C. So Rick Scott can try, and he has, to pander and try to get some votes there. But when they hear who I am and they know who I am, they won't, those attacks, even though they will try, it's not going to stick. And when it comes to Medicare or Social Security, the thing that I tell, and it's going to be central to the campaign, obviously, I mean, this man wants to completely sunset Medicare and Social Security and repeal the Affordable Care Act in a state where we have the second largest number of seniors living here in the state of Florida that rely on those benefits. And these are programs, they're not socialist programs, by the way. These are programs that you all paid into. I mean, we have been working our entire life to pay into those programs. They're benefits that you were already investing in. So, and even Medicare, I mean, I would love to continue to expand Medicare coverage. They don't cover eyesight, they don't cover dental. I mean, there are a lot of issues also with Medicare. So that's how I'm going to talk about it. But the most important thing that we need to remind voters here in Florida is that this man is the one that will take all of that away, and I'm going to protect it.
I have a question about, there are a few coming in on chat we'll have to deal with. But I was reading an article a week or two ago about Univision and the takeover essentially by the ultra right wing. How does that affect anything that's going to happen in Miami-Dade? And do you have plans for how to deal with this? I mean, besides being you, which is pretty good.
So two things, and it's interesting because I've been on Univision many times, by the way, and I was just watching the Sunday political programs on Univision, and I think they're feeling the heat of all that media saying that they denied Biden from airing those ads when they were interviewing Trump. I think that they're feeling the pressure there. So they're being very, very careful now, and they're trying to always put both sides when they're interviewing about an issue. And they just 2 weeks ago, they had this Republican on their political Sunday show that was so angry, saying that Univision was left-wing, that they were highly partisan, working for the Democrats, that he even like got on a Sunday live show, he like closed his Zoom and left. So I think that was something that they should have never done. They're feeling the pressure, and it seems like they're trying to be unbiased, which is good. And I'll have ads on Univision. I doubt they're not going to air my ads on Univision. Another thing is some of the Spanish radio that was leading in misinformation, a couple of those have been purchased by a group that's going to be very fair in their reporting. So that's going to help us also going into the 2024 election. And I intend to be on as many radio shows as I can, because Latinos, especially older Latinos, they get their news through Spanish radio.
There are a couple of things coming in chat. People, you can unmute and just ask, but Charles wants to know, what does Debbie think of the deal just made with Maduro?
Yeah, we're not happy. Venezuelans are not happy. Alex Saab is extremely toxic to the people of Venezuela. I mean, he's someone that used food to, I don't even know what words to use, but he allowed Venezuelans to starve, having food there just to punish them, to punish dissent. He's horrible. So Venezuelans are very upset about the fact that they negotiated with Maduro. The only thing that I can say, because I saw the statement of the primary winner, her name is Maria Corina Machado, who is challenging Maduro, and part of the negotiation was to allow for the elections to happen in 2024 in Venezuela. The problem is that when you're dealing with people like Maduro, I mean, he's part of a narco regime. If you really study Venezuela and what's happened there are drug traffickers that are actually part of that entire government structure. And that's why, he continues to take hold of that country. We'll see if they can hold. I think if they hold elections and they allow Maria Corina Machado, because Maduro was saying, no, we're not going to recognize this primary election. Well, if they recognize her, if they have the elections, I think that that's going to be very fruitful. And eventually, I think Venezuelans would not be as upset about the hostage situation. And we need to always support trying to liberate American hostages. That needs to be a priority of the United States. But very difficult when you're negotiating with someone who has done so much damage to the country.
Okay, I see something from Kate saying we have time for one or two more questions. I'll read a couple that look good. What are Debbie's positions on the Israeli-Hamas conflict and the border crisis? I'm sure you can sum that up in just a word or two.
Okay, the hardest topics of the day. Let me see. Look, my husband is Jewish, and when I saw what happened on October 7th, I very, very quickly had a statement out. I mean, and 2 hours that I saw what had occurred in Israel, that I stood firmly in support of Israel. I stand firmly in their right to defend themselves. But at the same time, as a mother watching those images and seeing so many civilians being killed and caught in the crossfire, we need to make sure, as leaders of democracy, as leaders that are protecting human rights and are trying to enforce order, that we need to send humanitarian aid to Gaza, that we need to do what we can to protect those families from being caught in the crossfire, allowing them to exit through Egypt. So it's an extremely complicated issue. It's an issue that has really caused a lot of people here in the United States to go into their emotional reactions to what was going on. And I'm concerned that here in this country, a lot of people are misinformed, don't understand the history behind that war. There was a ceasefire before October 7th, but now where do we go from here? And that's the question. And I think I support Secretary of State Blinken. I got to know him when I was serving for the Summit of the Americas, and he's doing all the right things. He's trying in his own way. He's a Jew, and he's trying in his own way
He's dynamite.
Yes, she is.
try and get to a point where, yes, we need to eradicate Hamas, but we need to protect civilian life. And how do we do that?
May I?
Anyone
May I
else?
speak? May I
Sure.
speak, David?
Yeah,
I get email from your folks on a daily basis asking for donations. And I'm waiting anxiously for the opportunity to actually make a donation. But each day I respond, I want to meet you. I want to hear from you. I want you to come to Palm Beach County. My significant other, Janet Zweibeck, and myself, we're very active. I make a lot of phone calls. I want to tell people who you are, but I want them to see you. I want them to hear you. You're saying all the right things. You know, I just came back from a cruise, and one of the people I cruised with is a professor named Watson, Robert Watson. And he said to a group of us, give me the names of heroes, American heroes that others may never know who even existed, and let's talk about them. Well, I picked 4 people, and what I found to be interesting, all 4 were either first or second generation Americans. They came here and made incredible contributions to our society. I live in a community with a lot of seniors. Many of them were not born here, or their parents weren't born here. They have lost faith in the system. But the things you're talking about, and who you are, and when you came, and why you came, that's what they have to hear. My own thinking, I think about my grandparents, who 100 years ago walked across Europe to get away from the Tsar. And I understand why, what they were running away from. But you understand this. People remember what happened with their fathers and grandfathers, etc. You have to talk to them. You have to meet them. I liked Val Demings, but she was very late coming to the county. Don't make that same mistake, please.
Well, I have to say, Jack, I'm very proud to say I've been traveling all over the state, and I was in Palm Beach. I was at the Pancakes and Politics event.
The North County Democrat.
Jupiter.
Yeah. So I'll come.
Can
I
I
mean,
ask a question?
yes.
Because I put part of my question on and we skipped over. Hi, I'm June. I have a couple things. I lived in Miami for a few years. I have a Cuban daughter-in-law, and I wrote a letter to the Miami Herald, which was published in reaction to Trump's vile statements about immigrants. Then I went down there to this huge Cuban crowd after I wrote that. And I also basically said that the Cubans should look at the plight of people who didn't have the easy access that they had, because of our political stance then. And then I walked into that crowd at Thanksgiving. Let's just say I didn't have the warmest welcome. But the reason I bring that up is my daughter-in-law has a very close relative who's an executive with Univision, and also one who is a judge. So getting information back and forth, and I'm so glad Michael brought up the socialism issue. They are, forgive me, indoctrinated with exactly what you said, that everything that we consider simply the pooling of resources as socialism. And for reasons I don't understand, that's a fallacy that's remained. And I'd like to help you with your campaign. And that's something I would work on tearing apart in different ways. The other thing I think too is we need to nail Scott, get him to answer to these vile things that Trump has said about immigrants, you know, the poisoning of the blood and all. Scott is slimy. He's oily. He just doesn't want to answer. He's very much like, and so is Rubio. And I think if we can get him either with letters or statements, find a way, nail him to the wall on this. You know, that does he agree with them? If not, I think that's so important. Now, getting away from the Hispanic community there too, or that 60 countries have lost either all or some of their freedoms in the past couple of years. People aren't paying attention to that. It's here with us now. I believe we're on the verge because of what's happened. I think that message in detail to that community will help.
Yeah, dude.
The last thing excuse me, and the last thing I wanted to say was, getting away from all that.
Folks need to mute themselves. If they are not speaking with Debbie, you need to mute yourself. If you're not actively speaking, please mute yourself. Thank you.
I don't understand. I'm talking to Debbie.
No,
Not you. If I'm talking about the people
All right.
who are
And
not.
the last thing is to look at the big donors that both DeFascist has had and Scott. Those people looking at commercial and residential development, they want to turn every spot green into concrete. That is a big issue, at least for Palm Beach County and people up here. Thank you.
Thank you, June. The only thing that I want to just, if we can all not say that, well, socialist program, are you against it? I want us to get completely away from trying to explain what's good about some social programs. We just need to say, yes, you're absolutely correct. There's no socialism in this country. There isn't. I mean, a lot of, even Medicare, you have private insurance companies that are actually managing Medicare that are, you know, so we need to kind of focus on rejecting it immediately and then moving on, pivoting to attacking Rick Scott on all the terrible things that he's doing. I mean, I'm going to start my campaign from the beginning, just rejecting that, and then constantly reminding people of who Rick Scott is. And then he's already been on the defensive, by the way. He's been attacking me left and right about all sorts of things. You know, any opportunity he gets, and it's just because he's feeling threatened. He knows that I can beat him. He knows. And there were some really great articles that I'm going to ask Kate to send you that just came out this week on I am the person to beat Rick Scott, and then you can share with all your groups. And I do promise that I will come back to Palm Beach. It's not that far from me, and just communicate with Kate so that I can see you in person.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking.
Michael wanted one more question, but Kate said that has to be the last one. Do we have a really short question?
Yes.
In the room?
Short question?
Yes.
In the room.
I heard you talk about the fascist Republican, or the GOP MAGA organization. And I haven't heard you talk about the rights and liberties that are being systematically stripped away, especially here in Florida, all over the country. Rights like abortion rights and rights to learn about Black history in school and so many others. Are you going to be talking about that in your campaign?
I'm going to talk about all of it. What we're going to start doing. I mean, I talk about every time I have meetings like this, everywhere I go, I start by saying that we're ground zero for those attacks here in the state of Florida, that they're trying to rip all of our freedoms. A lot of it is a civil liberties issue, right? These are our civil liberties as women, as LGBTQ, as teachers, as students. I mean, everything here is under attack, including businesses and municipalities. So, but you can't talk about everything in a campaign. You need to focus on the issues that are going to resonate to everyone all over the state. I suspect, and we're going to do focus groups, obviously, to see what are the issues that unite the entire state. And what I start with is the affordability issue, economic issues, opportunities, then moving on to Medicare, Social Security, gun violence, which is part of my personal issue. And I think that resonates with everyone, and of course, abortion. But look, I also need to talk about the environment, right? And that's very important for coastal communities. And I did a lot of work when I was in Congress. I actually led the effort to bring the $200 million for Everglades restoration that DeSantis and they all wanted to take credit for. When I first got elected, I met with the Appropriations Committee chair to start requesting that line item, and that had never been done. And it was after talking to a lot of different environmental groups. They said, you know, we need at least 140 million, and I asked for 200. Of course, once it was on the item, Marco Rubio went in for it, of course, in the Senate. And then when it came here, we had a huge event, and DeSantis that's probably why you never even saw my name next to the $200 million Everglades funding. But that started with me pushing for it in appropriations with the help of other Democrats. And then we got that through. So that's a very important issue that I'm going to have to also discuss. So we can't talk about everything. I don't want to be caught in the culture wars, I'm telling you, because they want you to do that. They want to debate about what is it to be a woman, or what bathrooms. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not. We need to talk about the most important issues that are going to let me win so that I can protect freedom and liberty here for Floridians.
Hello,
Okay.
I'd like to ask a question. Can I ask a question?
I'm so sorry.
I think we're done.
Yeah, any follow-up, go to kate@debbieforflorida.com. We're out of time. She's got to go. We're getting the manager yelling at us.
I would never yell, but thank you so much for having us.
She's got to go. She got somewhere else. She's got to be in a minute.
It was such a pleasure to be with you all. And look, I'm going to come to Palm Beach. We will do this again. I'm going to try to be as present as I can be all over the state. My mission and my commitment to you is I'm going to work every single day to show the country what is possible in Florida so that we can beat Rick Scott, get the funding that we need, and really start taking back our state. So thank you, everybody. Have a great holiday. Try to get some rest. I'm going to try to do that too, because January comes, it's going to be crazy, and I need all of you and full of energy to help me get out the vote. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks much.
People who are here and on Zoom, we have another candidate that I'd like to ask to come up. Dave set it up so I'm displaying, and he can sit down and talk to the people on Zoom and the people in the room. His name is Dan Eisinger. He works in the Public Defender's Office. He's spoken to our club before, and they do amazing work. So, Dan, why don't you?
Oh, thanks.
You bet.
You can leave the dog.
David, he got to explain it.
We got him on Zoom.
Well, we don't have him here.
You don't need him there. You have him live there.
All right, no problem. All right.
All right. Well, good evening. Thanks for having me, Michael, and you all. As Michael said, I do currently work at the Public Defender's Office, and I've done so for about 20 years now. Carrie Howitt's your elected public defender, and she's retiring, sadly, for me too. But I've been with her my entire career, and I've been just so blessed that she has encouraged me to run for her seat. I think it would always be her seat, no matter what happens. But she's encouraged me to run. She's endorsed me, obviously, in my campaign, and that means the world to me, no matter what happens in this crazy election stuff. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I did grow up here in Palm Beach County. For the most part, I went to Suncoast High School in Riviera Beach. My dad ran a social services agency in Riviera Beach called Siegel Industries for the Disabled, Fred Eisinger. And what I learned from my dad, he didn't always talk a lot, but what I learned from watching him was that if you're gonna spend all these hours at a workplace, if you're gonna basically be away from your family 40, 50, 60 hours a week, which is what he did and which is what I do. You better do something that means a lot and that can give back to the community. And it's not just about cashing a paycheck. And that's what he did. And that's what I've done for 20 years. You know, this office is all about representing poor people. That's what we do. And we have some wonderful, wonderful litigators in the courtroom. We also are involved in the community. I can tell you, Michael mentioned that I had been here before. I think the first time I came was all about Amendment 4.
Yeah.
Our office helped about 500 to 600 people vote in that election. We found a loophole, essentially. Remember when Tallahassee got a hold of Amendment 4, they made it so that you had to pay all your court fees in order before you could vote. So what we did here locally, I met with Mr. Ehrenberg. We got together with Carrie's knowledge of it as well. And we said, we're going to take the court costs out of the sentencing paperwork. We're going to make it its own thing. And that will allow people to go ahead and vote. And the judges sign those orders, taking the court costs out of the sentencing judgments and orders. So we got about 500 or 600 people to vote. And that was the sort of collaboration I think you're looking for when it comes to those types of topics. You know, of course, prosecutors and defense lawyers, we disagree about a lot of stuff, mostly having to do with sentencing and what's appropriate for individuals. But it's that kind of stuff, the policy things, that I think we can work together on, and we have. I've done just about everything in that office. I've tried death penalty cases. I've tried little misdemeanor cases. And I think what makes me so happy to be there is working with our young lawyers that we get from all over the country who just want to do good. They want to help the underserved. They want to help the less fortunate. And I've been really, really proud to work with them. I think we have a great reputation both locally and nationally. We're asked to go do a lot of talking and speaking and training all over. I went to Dayton, Ohio, not too long ago to do a little training up there. And I just want to continue Carrie's legacy as an office that does great advocacy for people who need it the most. And I'm happy to answer any questions or talk more about myself. But I surely don't want to bore you either. So I appreciate your time and letting me introduce myself once again.
Yeah, let me just add one thing about Amendment 4. We were canvassing and there was some guy who ran into, he said he'd been arrested. He thinks he paid his, but he's not sure. So I called up the office. I got transferred to some guy who was driving. And he said, if you email me the details of this guy, it was late in the day, I'll look into it. The next morning, I had an email back with a picture of the guy and something like that was stamped that showed he had paid all of his dues, and then I went and I told him he could register. I think he did register, and then he didn't vote. Because 2020, he was afraid what would happen to him, that, Trump was going to come down here and arrest him, and I was not going to push him because, that's what, look at what DeSantis did recently.
And I can tell you 2 quick things about that in terms of this fight never ending. So I currently represent one individual named Robert Simpson. Right now, we had court yesterday, and he's charged with voting fraudulently. Now, they haven't gone after people who voted who hadn't paid their court costs. They're going after people who were disqualified for other reasons. Either they had a homicide offense or a sex offense. But the reality is a lot of these folks, including Mr. Simpson, only voted because they thought they could. It was an advocacy group who went to him at some event and said, hey, did you finish your sentence? Yeah, I finished my sentence. Well, go ahead and vote. And so he did. And so DeSantis's kind of henchmen went and arrested him in Belgrade. But we're going to win his trial. I'm really proud to represent him. And I think it's just a farce. It was all about chilling the vote. It was all about having people like Mr. Simpson and like the person you talked to say, I ain't going to risk voting. I don't care that much because I'm not going to jail. And then I think it also chilled people like like you all, who normally would go out and canvass and normally would go out and try to get people to vote. I think we all don't want to put anybody in harm's way. So of course, we're not doing as much as we did because it's scary. The other thing I'll say about why this is so important to me and to the office is, people who commit crimes and make mistakes, they're punished way too long. And the only way they're going to get back and feel human again after they get done with prison or jail is to feel part of the community.
Yes.
And one big way to do that is to vote. It's to vote. Mr. Simpson, when he was arrested, he said, all I wanted to do was just be one of you. That's what he told the police when they arrested him. And the ironic part, of course, is it came out later in an interview. They asked him, well, who'd you vote for anyway? I voted for Trump. So this idea that there was this rampant, unlawful voting with this grand conspiracy, it was all bunk. It was all nothing.
Yeah, I think it was Judge Walker, before Amendment 4 had a case, and someone did a lot of homework, and they had Rick Scott sitting there in the Clemency Commission, and saying, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
We can do whatever we want. And then he asked some guy, what was your felony? And he said, well, I voted illegally. And they said, who did you vote for? And he said, well, you. And 5 minutes later, he got clemency. I mean, no shame.
For sure. This idea that all these former felons were going to come back and just vote across the board for Democrats. I mean, that was an assumption that I don't think was ever going to be true either. So the point was they just wanted to vote. They just wanted to be part of us again, as Mr. Simpson said. The one thing I'll leave you with something, I don't know. I thought this was so encouraging because I hate always being pessimistic about things. 66% of Floridians voted for Amendment 4. 66%. So that's Democrats, that's Republicans, that's MPAs, that's independents. That's a huge, huge number. And I'll tell you, doing a lot of jury trials, and that's a lot of what I do during jury selection. We talk about, because there are charges that they have to know the person was a felon, like felon in possession of a firearm. A lot of jurors, a lot of people believe in second chances. They'll say, well, I don't need to know about that old felony. I'm not going to judge him based on what he did 10, 15 years ago. I want to know about him today. And I think that always makes me feel better. And I think the fact that 66% of our citizenry here in Florida wanted to give people the chance to vote, I think that tells you our leaders don't speak for the people. Maybe DeSantis doesn't want them to vote, and maybe Trump doesn't want them to vote. Yeah.
Simple. What's NPA?
No party affiliation.
Yeah, it's like an independent.
Thank
you.
I remember years ago hearing Jerry speaking down at South County, and somebody was really kind of nasty about gun control and saying, we need stronger gun control. But she painted a picture of a Belgrade family and how these poor kids were being broken into, and they were saying, well, why didn't they have guns? But she pointed out they did have guns to protect themselves. She painted this human side. I'll never forget that.
I had a client from Belgrade. He was middle-aged, nicest guy, hadn't been in trouble in forever. And he was some sort of taxi driver. And he got pulled over for, I don't know, not using a tail signal or something very minor. And the cop just asked him, because this is what they do when you're African-American and driving. Do you have weapons in your car? They would never ask me that. They probably wouldn't ask you that, but they always ask them that. And he said, well, I do. It's in my glove compartment. And they said, well, Mr. Williams, why do you have a gun in your glove compartment? In the neighborhood that I live, I've been robbed 4 or 5 times. And as a taxi driver, I'm scared to go without it. And they looked up his history. He had a felony from almost 20 years earlier. And they arrested him for felon in possession. And in Florida, if you're in actual possession of the weapon, so it's in your ready reach or your control, it's a 3-year mandatory sentence.
Oh,
no.
And I just said, well, this can't be how Mr. Williams goes down. Thankfully, members of the community stepped up, spoke as to the kind of human he was, the kids he raised. Even I think we got the mayor of Belgrade to speak on his behalf and convince the state attorney's office to drop the charges. But, you know, it's very easy to be law and order, law and order, law and order when you're running for office. And that's what Republicans tend to do. But there's real lives at stake.
There's a human side.
And that and those mandatory sentences, when you take the discretion away from the judges, it's bad news for a lot of our folks. So
Well,
yeah.
we're lucky to have, I mean, for the last 12 years, Dave Arenberg, you know, he is, I don't know if he was state attorney when that took place, but
Yeah. Our offices like I said, we get along. We have good working relationships. We just started a misdemeanor mental health court that focuses on getting services to mentally ill people. It was our idea that Dave and his folks signed off on it relatively quickly. The idea that we're criminalizing being sick, you know, that these people who were charged with trespass and disorderly conduct, the most minor of charges, are sitting in our jails because they're off their medication or they haven't seen a doctor in a while. And so we thought, you know, enough of this. It's time to just get them services, and then their cases would be dropped. And that's what we've been doing for about 6 months. And it's been really effective. Most people are not being rearrested after they get linked back up with their doctors. So that's just one example of something we've done with them that's really been beneficial.
okay.
You stated that the judge here in Palm Beach County did away with the fees that are like, why is it a problem for other county judges to do the same?
Because the prosecutors and the defense lawyers couldn't get on the same page. So in the more rural, the more conservative parts of the state, they just said no. They just said no. Here, because it's, you know, still a fairly liberal county, and Mr. Ehrenberg was on board, being the Democrat that he is, we were able to get together. But if I would have tried that in, you know, the Panhandle or Lake County or Lake City, or forget it, we never would have gotten that accomplished. I know that, you know.
Can I ask a question or make a comment? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes?
yes, we can. hear-
Okay. Hi. First of all, I think you're doing God's work. Thank you. I should say, what's hurt me so much the past few days are the 3 men who were on television who had been wrongfully convicted. One man spent 42 years in prison and he was innocent. I'm not asking you for a magic bullet. The thing is, according to the National Registry of Exonerations, we've had 73 people went through the same thing who were convicted and later proved innocent. That is a sin that has no atonement. I'm sorry. Is there anything new happening that you may be aware of that can help these situations? I'm not asking, you know, if anybody has a magic bullet, but other than the DNA, which we've used so long, that, you know, the idea was that they relied on eyewitnesses, which are notoriously incorrect. Do you have any information for us?
Project, right?
The Innocence Project is still active, although they're obviously just one unit. I can tell you something we've done in our office, which has been a game changer for us, is we developed our own forensic unit. So what that means is we realize that lawyers aren't the best scientists. We don't do math, we don't do science. I know I don't. I called my sister, who's a doctor. I said, hey, Karen, you got to help me with this DNA stuff. But I realized that we weren't serving our clients the best by doing it that way. So instead, we started hiring lawyers from school, out of law school, with science backgrounds, who we then trained and sent them to different trainings to be forensic lawyers. So, for example, I had a case 2 weeks ago. It was a gun case, and I was convinced that the DNA was placed there erroneously, or because it was his brother's gun. And so our forensic person went to depositions and went to court, and we litigated that And eventually the sheriff expert, the DNA expert, agreed with us and they dropped the charges. So
Wonderful.
I realized that in order to up our game to be the best advocates we needed to be, we had to get better on the forensic stuff. And so we started our own unit, and the sheriff actually now talks about it in a way that basically it's almost like we're keeping them honest, which is what prevents those erroneous convictions. I can tell you though, in terms of the death penalty, thankfully, on my watch and Carrie's watch, we haven't had one death penalty recommendation in over 20 years. Since she's
Which
been.
is great, but 42 years in prison is not.
I know,
Any
but
relevance.
once you're sentenced to death, you're never going home.
Yeah.
I
And
know.
so
Thank you.
and of course, just the horrible part is that, I don't know if you know this, but now in Florida, they've made even a non-homicide offense eligible for the death penalty. So if you're convicted of a sex offense, which of course is horrible, no one's saying it's not. But if you're convicted of a capital sexual battery, the state can seek the death penalty. We are the only state as far as I know, who is doing that now in Florida. Florida and Texas make up 75% of the death penalty cases now. So DeSantis has signed the death warrants for more people in his tenure than I think the last 5 or 6 governors combined. So that's where we are. And that's why, not to toot our own horns here, but that's why you have got to have really good prosecutors and you've got to have really good defense lawyers and public defenders, because if you don't, all hell can break loose. Look what went on in New Orleans and Houston, where that's where these erroneous convictions come from.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, I think when you're.
Last question.
Ladies' room, please.
Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah.
I meet a lot of returning citizens. Is it still with it? And I give your number.
Yeah.
So that they can find out what
Yes.
their status is.
Yeah, just like Mike said. Yep, we're still doing it. Unfortunately, the numbers have just been much, much less because people are so scared about it, but we're still doing it. I think we submitted about 40 orders to be signed the last couple of weeks for this upcoming election. So we're doing it. It's just sad, of course, that it's not the same numbers we were getting years ago. But yes, give them my information.
Are you running? Is anybody running against you and the Democratic?
Yes, there is a gentleman, Adam Frankel. He's a city commissioner in Delray. I don't know him very well, to be honest. He was a public defender for a year or two, way before Carrie and I even started. But he's a city commissioner, to answer your question.
Well, good for you.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. That's a good way to end.
Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, is anyone still on Zoom?
I am.
June? June?
Yeah.
I will call you tomorrow.
Okay.
Got a couple still on, couple of hard cases.
Who's on?
You got a couple of hard cases. You got Charles, Myron.
Oh, Charlie, hi. I can't see anything on my screen. It's all Dave's fault.
Stewart.
He was.
Michael,
Yeah.
Michael,
Yeah.
I have to thank you for this meeting. I feel so much better. Debbie is gonna make it.
Yeah.
I think she had, I just feel better. I feel better that we have some new system in place to help with those, again, who are innocent and convicted, because that's something that, as I said,
Right.
there's no atonement for it. So this meeting has been great.
Yeah, okay.
Michael, Rob Norman here. Thank you. Thank you.
See you, kids.
Great meeting.
All right.
5,
And
4, 3, 2, 1.
see you next month.